Alright guys, let's talk about number 14. 14 says which of the following is not a function of the graph above. So I'm going to be looking at this the graph above. And what I recommend doing here, if you see this sort of question, is to just try to graph the function, okay? Don't even worry about the answer choices. Note I've covered up the answer choices here. I'm not concerned with that. What I want to do is I want to figure out the graph, what the equation is of the graph. Just my equation. And then from there I can possibly figure out the rest of the answer choices, okay? To do this, we follow a process. And the process that I suggested you follow is first, is that you want to find the amplitude. And we denoted the amplitude as the max y value minus the min y value over 2. And the max y value here is 3 minus the min y value, which is negative 1 over 2. And this is going to give me 4 over 2, which is 2. So my amplitude here is just simply 2. Alright. The next value, the next component of this that we calculate is going to be the what? It's going to be the d value. The d value is denoted, d for denoted, not really, max y minus the amp. And so all I have to do here is write down the max y value, which we already had said earlier, the max y value was 3. So 3 minus the amplitude, that's what you just figured out over here, which is 2. And this gives me my d value of 1. Okay, so this d value is 1. So d equals 1. In case there's confusion, I'll go ahead and box this too. This is my amplitude. Amplitude. Alright, so now that I have this, I'm going to go on the statement, the part 3. And part 3, what we said in part 3 is we're going to decide whether it's sine or cosine. So when you look at this function here, look at this function here, you decide whether it's sine or cosine. Now, remember, the cosine graph, when we draw the parent, it looks something like this. And the sine graph looks something like this. Okay? Clearly I'm a fantastic artist. When we look at this here, I'm going to go ahead and say we're starting here on the side here, on the y. And you don't have to. You could start here if you wanted to. You could start here if you wanted to. Start here if you wanted to. There's a lot of different points you can start. And that's where it's important to note that this function here is, whether actually I'm talking about this graph, or even this one, these are all known as sinusoidal functions. In other words, it's sine or cosine. Sine and cosine are the same function, just with translations. So, it's worth noting that if I took my sine graph and I shifted it back 90 degrees, it would then become cosine. In fact, that's why cosine is called cosine. It's complementary of sine. So all of these graphs can be sine or cosine, but if I'm starting on the y-axis and it starts here at this 1, this negative 1, is very similar to this, only it's been flipped. And what we could say is that this graph is a negative cosine. Okay, so that's important to note. Next up, I'm going to go through and I'm going to figure out whether what the c value is. Now, the c value is how far it shifts from the y-axis, or for when x is equal to 0. So note, I said I'm going to start here, so my c value here is 0. But it doesn't have to be there. You could make your c value, you could say the function again starts here, in which case it'd be, c would be 45. So you'd have some x minus 45 value. Or here, you could start at 90, and this is the x minus 90. So you have different points that you could start from. But in our case, it's going to be c is going to be 0. All right, last thing we have to decide is what the b value is. Now, earlier in another video I did show this. I said 360 divided by the period is b. So you just have to decide what the period of the function is. So if this thing starts at 0 and ends at 180, the period is how long it takes for the graph to repeat itself, how long it takes to oscillate through one revolution on the unit circle. And here we see that it's 180. So we know the period is going to be 180. And this gives me a B value of 2. Okay, a B value of 2. And something else to note here is this makes perfect sense because 180 is half of 360. So remember we said the B value is the opposite effect. So it's half as much. So it's 2. 2 is half as much. Okay? So now we have our equation. I'm going to use the form y equals A. We're using cosine here. So cosine bx minus c plus d. Fit it in. Awesome. So we said A is the amp, which is 2. So 2 cosine. All right, a little small here. B is 2. X minus c. Note I started out the y-axis, so it's 0 plus d, and d is 1. So this becomes 2 cosine 2x plus 1. Which if I wanted to, I could write as 1 plus 2 cosine 2x. Order of the 1 can be in the back or the front, doesn't matter. Okay, so let's see here. Does that match any of my answers? Except, oops, made one little mistake. Remember how I said cosine was negative? Yeah, this should be negative. This should be negative. This should be negative. Oops. So maybe I'm going to rewrite this as 1 minus 2 cosine 2x, making more sense. Fantastic. So now I look over here. I have 1 minus 2 cosine 2x. Whoa, that's the first one. So clearly that is true. All right. If we look at the other answer choices, it's important to note that the D value, the A value, the B value for the other two are actually the same. Okay. The only difference about the A value, I guess you could say, is that here it's positive and here it's negative. Okay. Look at the function. Okay. This one is saying you're shifting 90. So we said earlier that when we shift 90, we're over here. So we'd say we're starting here, which is okay because the cosine graph starts up and it goes down. So if this guy is starting up and it's going down, that would be fine. And then the C, it's plus 45 degrees. So if note 45 is here, and we said the sine goes up and then down. Notice over here, the sine goes up and then down. So that would be fine as well. So actually, all three are correct, and the answer has to be D. They all are. Hopefully that makes sense. If you really, at the end of the day, are having difficulty, you can always just type in all of these functions into your calculator, and you could use that to determine what the answer is. So that is also an alternative method. Use the calculator, since you have one. Just type in the functions, and you can see which answer choice matches up. All right. Hopefully that helps you. I know this question was kind of tough. Maybe you need to watch this video a couple times. If you need to, please do so. All right, see you in the next video.